Hello, and welcome to North Country Matters. My name is Donna Seymour. I'm a member of the St. Lawrence County League of Women Voters, one of the civic partners for our show. My guests today are retired Clarkson professor Daniel Dullea and St. Lawrence County League of Women Voters President Kathy Stein. Our topic today is Empowering the Future, a case study on nuclear power in the North Country, a class that Professor Dullea held this spring at Clarkson. Dan and Kathy, welcome to North Country Matters. Kathy, you're a frequent guest on the show, and Dan, you're the father, so to speak, of North Country Matters, which has a real world laboratory that you created for your mass communication students 22 years ago. The rest, as they say, is history.
Wow. I tell you what, the media landscape sure has changed since then. And it is really, really remarkable that you keep it going. And it's very important because local media is a desert, except for little things like this. And we have to keep doing them as much as we can because the communication is the whole thing of getting civil society to understand all of the things that are going on. And thank God for North Country Matters for the North Country.
Well, thank you,
Yes,
Dan, for
indeed.
that, because right now in rural America, everything is a desert, isn't it, Kathy?
Yes, in too many ways. But yes, Donna, let me also echo Dan's praise and thank you so much for North Country Matters and keeping it going. And you've got a loyal following.
Well, it was a great idea 22 years ago, and we've morphed with the times because clearly we're not in the same, as Dan says, the same media environment we were then. But it's important that these things continue, and it's also important that they meet people where they need to be. So I think we've all been lucky with that. So Dan, why don't you give us some background on how you came to be teaching this spring and what the impetus was for your redesign of the class, environmental communication? Because as I mentioned, you're retired, so you came back out of retirement for this.
I did. It's actually the second year that I taught. Last year I taught public speaking, but that's a piece of cake, and it's a joyous thing to do to get kids, young people, to be able to express their ideas and do it in a coherent fashion. But then I got the opportunity to teach environmental communications, which in a way is a hangover course that they hadn't had anybody to taught in a number of years, and they gave me the chance. And in the past, it's been kind of a textbook taught course that had all of the elements of learning how to write PR pieces, learning how to create various kinds of media, and reading text. Well, in November, as I was preparing the course, I went to a meeting in November at Clarkson called Nuclear 101, where proponents of nuclear power came to tell us how wonderful it would be. And Marianne and I went to it, and I really believe they believe it's a wonderful thing. But it gave me the point of saying, I want to learn more. How can I learn more? Well, I'm teaching a class in environmental communications. Instead of it being a cookie cutter, how can I make this a real world experience for the students? And that's how it morphed into a case study throughout the whole semester. Thank God I had kids who really, really enjoyed it and were engaged.
And they worked really hard because Kathy and I sat in on a few of your classes, and you make a great point about how was a real world opportunity. You've always done that with your mass communication students. That was one of the reasons why you created North Country Matters, which was an opportunity to use the tools you had at Clarkson at the time, which was WCKN, the public access station,
Yep.
which is more than back when I used to watch it, Fish TV,
Right.
and something for Clarkson hockey classes. Why is this so important now? I mean, you've talked a little bit about that, but this is really, as you mentioned, a changing environment, and people don't have access to the same media tools they used to. Although, in one sense, we have access to much more media, but it doesn't the same as local media, is it?
It's chaos and cacophony is all we got. There's so much going on. And it seemed important to me, and I had the go ahead from the department, the art, culture, and technology department, to do it in this fashion. And the important part is our students becoming part of the community and the community understanding our students. And it was a real world learning and teaching opportunity, not only for me as a teacher, but learning the whole time and sharing that learning with the students. And then again, sharing and learning from the community. Wonderful. I'd say it was the best teaching experience I've ever had in my whole life.
Well, that is quite an accolade. So, very early on, you connected with the League of Women Voters and North Country Matters to become your collaboration partners in this
Yep.
project. Why was that important to you and to your students?
Because it was bringing us beyond Clarkson University and bringing us with an organization that is absolutely understood worldwide to be objective learning, teaching, and civically minded organization that was perfect, that already had connections with various people and the ability to give us some credibility outside the university.
Well, Kathy, that's quite an accolade for the
Yeah.
league, and I agree with Dan 100%. It's very true. So this collaboration was very much in line with the league's overall mission, isn't it? Explain how an examination of nuclear energy fitting into the league's overall position on energy, local development, and the environment made so much sense to us in the league.
Yes, and it really did. And I'm gonna in my response, I'm actually gonna draw on some of the league's official positions here to show you what a good match it was. Since the 1960s, the league has been at the forefront of efforts to protect air, land, and water resources. Very quickly, the league, got involved in the environmental movement. The League believes that government policies should promote the management of natural resources as interrelated parts of life supporting ecosystems. They should promote resource conservation, stewardship, and long range planning, with the responsibility for managing natural resources shared by all levels of government. And that is very important to the League. And finally, public policies should preserve the physical, chemical, and biological integrity of the ecosystem while maximizing protection of public health and the environment. With regards to energy, and the League has extensive policies to do with energy, the League supports environmentally sound policies to reduce energy growth rates, emphasize energy conservation, and encourage the use of renewable energy sources. The League's approach to nuclear issues, and we have an extensive one, is one of problem solving. The League's aim is to work constructively for the maximum protection of public health and safety and of the environment, and to promote citizen participation in the decision-making process at all levels of government. The League generally opposes reliance on nuclear fission, but recognizes its place in the nation's energy mix, especially in light of the serious threat climate change represents to our nation and our planet. So that's summarizes the League's overall position.
So, Dan, that really means that the league was a great partner in this, wasn't it, for your class? Because we
Absolutely.
were, yeah, we were part of the community. We have an extensive resources and research that we've done as a nonpartisan organization. We weren't out to take a position, but we really are behind public education and public participation in these decisions. So tell us a little bit about the makeup of your class and how they divided up the workload. This was an extremely ambitious undertaking for a one semester class, wasn't it?
Oh, it sure was. But I want to go back a second to what Kathy said, and the the League's position on nuclear energy. Historically, I have been anti-nuclear for most of my adult life. I listen to lots of people who are very intelligent, who I trust and understand. They're split, some on one side, some on the other. I have come to listen to and think about it in the way that Bill McKibben does. And Bill McKibben says nuclear energy has a place that's here already. But expanding it and making more of it, you got to convince me. It doesn't seem like a good idea. There's so many other ways to find energy for us, especially in needs of the North Country, of our own local needs, not what the state thinks should be done with where we live. That's part of environmental justice. But let me get back to the students. The students I had were amazing. All of them were involved in the Institute of Sustainability at Clarkson with Sue. And many of them were majors and others in minors. The ones who were minors ran across the board of business students, of students in biology, psychology, pre-med kinds of things. So it was across the board. More women than men, unusual at Clarkson. I would say we had 10 women and 7 men in the class, and variety of different classes. A couple of freshmen, few sophomores, mostly juniors and seniors. But the freshmen kept the seniors going. They were the ones who kind of pushed the class. It was really fascinating and interesting because nobody got away with passing up and not taking a turn at saying what you believed in or what you learned from something that you read. And we had the most amazing discussions. We didn't always agree, but we always listened to each other, and we always did it in a civil fashion. It was amazing.
Well, civil and civic conversation is what this show is all about. And so the fact that your class was able to use those techniques is an indication that this is a winner, isn't it, in terms of looking at these big questions. So
Yeah.
part of what the class designed was a community survey to better understand what the knowledge base was of the public in the community and to find out what they wanted more information on. So were you able to come to any conclusions about what those needs were based on your survey responses, Dan?
To be honest, not really. There weren't enough answers to the survey for us to do anything more than understand the questions that people had. And they were the questions of people who are already concerned, either already pro or already negative. Most of the folks who completed the survey claimed to have a good understanding of nuclear power, which I find amazing because I still don't. And I've been spending a lot of time trying to figure it out. But it was good for the students to understand that before we went in, because we did understand that we had to be able to speak in a conversation where people might not be civil on the other side, because it's a very passionate kind of thing. So we even had a guest speaker come in via Zoom to talk about having difficult discussions with people you don't agree with. And it was the young woman was a student of mine more than a decade ago, Lauren Fischel, who is originally from Gouverneur, but now is out in her final semester at Oklahoma University for her doctorate. And she was great with the kids. We had a number of speakers who were good that came from a variety of places. Another one, a folklorist who was around the time and place of 3 Mile Island and of how the strange kind of cultural jokes that came out of that situation. We also had someone, a former EPA director, assistant director of the EPA, Robert Perciasepi, and he was great at being able to get the students to also understand it's not going to be an easy conversation, and ask our students a lot of questions, and it was a great give and take, and they became good at doing that and more confident as we went along.
You know, that is really the hallmark of modern society, which is how to have productive conversations with people who don't agree with you that are difficult. And so people with that skill are actually able to make a positive difference in the culture, aren't they?
I sure hope so, because otherwise we don't have a chance.
We don't. So, Kathy, the league sponsored a public forum on April 2nd to report out what the students' findings were and gather more public input. Tell us a little bit about that forum and what we learned from the public comments period, which followed the reports from the students, because the students did a very detailed set of reports based on what they had learned, and it was a very impactful event, wasn't it?
It really was. Yeah, the forum was held in the Potsdam Village Community Room, and the turnout was excellent. It was a cold, rainy night, and we had excellent turnout. After a few introductory remarks by Dan and myself, I just sort of explained what the league was. And also we had introductory remarks, land acknowledgement statement delivered by Hope Hicks, who's the president of the American Indian Science and Engineering Society of Clarkson University. And that was
Which to
very,
me, excuse me, but to me, that was an important way to start it, to set the
yes.
table, because everybody who lives up here, to some degree, loves this land. Sorry I interrupted, but I
Yeah,
had to say
no,
that.
no, no, no. And I was really pleased that you had, asked her to do that. So Dan's students presented their research. They'd broken down into teams. Some of them were talking more about just the technology, because there is newer technology that's being talked about here. Others talked about the various environmental impacts, the impacts up to the water and to the environment, and yeah, so it was very interesting. And the combined student presentations went on for a little over an hour, and then the public was invited to comment, and they did. That was almost another hour, and we could have gone longer than that.
Yes.
Overall, what we learned was that many of those who came to the forum were not happy about the idea of a nuclear facility being built in our area. Many of them were skeptical of the economic claims, the economic benefits that were being made by supporters, and they were concerned above all about the environmental impacts from the operation, operating such a facility, just the operation of it and the cooling and the water and whatnot, but also the nuclear waste that is a byproduct of these operations. I mean, Dan, you mentioned Sue Powers is
Yeah.
who we're talking about as head of the sustainability center at Clarkson University, and she was there. And she very mildly, she reminded us all of this idea of nuclear power. It's here, and if we're going to try to get away from fossil fuels, a lot of people feel that nuclear needs to be part of the mix. So everyone was very nice and very grateful to the students at the forum. It was terrific. The atmosphere was really very good.
It really was. It carried on what our ideal was civic and civil conversation. So, Dan, the entire forum was videotaped and it is available on YouTube. I will make sure that that link is in our show notes for anybody who wants to look at
Okey
it.
doke.
This was, as we've said, really a real world report out from the students on the class. What did the students learn from this class and their experience of doing this in a public forum? Because that's often not what happens at the end of a class. They make a report to the class, but this was very much out to the public. So tell us what they learned.
Yeah, well, to me, that's the point of the different way I taught the course and the way it had been taught in the past. I'm going to get up in front of the class and I'm going to make an important speech about this aspect of nuclear energy to the 20 kids in the class. Where here they presented to a lay audience that wanted to understand, that had passion for what was going on. And in some ways, some of the kids, when we got back to class the next day, the technology kids who were in some ways bought into um, SMRs is what they call them. They were upset about one part of the discussion when they were held to task about having all of the power that you're ever going to need in your life of nuclear power in a cup or in a soda can. And that is something that folks who are in favor of nuclear power think is a wonderful thing. However, people who don't, the idea that you have that much power in a can that can power the world is frightening. Remember, we only have this kind of technology because of the atomic bomb. And that is going to always hang over any kind of thing about this. It has to be always remembered, or we make the same mistakes as in the past.
I think one of the most impactful public comments was from a woman who grew up in Germany. And she was a young person when the Chernobyl accident happened in the Soviet Union. And when that cloud of radioactive material went over her community, everyone had to go in, farmers had to bring their cows in. They were literally, they were under the fallout cloud from an accident. And it through no fault of their own, and certainly not because they were doing anything with nuclear power in their own community, but they had no way to get away from it, and they just had to live through that experience. And I thought her comments were extremely good because that's for a lot of us of a certain age. We remember Chernobyl, we remember 3 Mile Island, we remember what happened in Fukushima, where things didn't go well. And so wanting to kind of put the brakes on this and make sure that we are talking about technology that people really understand is so important. And you mentioned the SMRs, which are the small modular reactors, which is what.
Which is funny. The funny thing about that is they take the word nuclear out of it. It's
Yeah.
small modular reactor. And from a communications PR point of view, it's kind of a greenwash.
That's a really good point. And we know from public comments by Governor Hochul that she wants the development of any of these not nuclear reactors, even though they are nuclear reactors in the state, to be in rural places. And we know that rural places are often the sacrifice zones for unpopular or potentially dangerous undertakings. Dan, why are we even talking about nuclear power in a place like the North Country? We don't need the power here. What is on the horizon that we should be thinking about why that extra power somebody else wants and they want us to host it? Because that's really what we're talking about, isn't it?
Well, I'll give the governor her due. I think that if she thinks it's important and they tell us, all of the promoters, that it is absolutely safe, why do they need to travel the power down 300 miles to Albany? I'm in favor of nuclear power put under the egg in Albany, or have it down in the Hudson Valley. See how they like it down there. It comes down to NIMBY in some ways, but we are the least powerful. So that means that we have to fight like hell to be treated fairly.
Well, and part of the fighting like hell part is also about educating ourselves, because this is something that is not well understood. There are only two of these small nuclear reactors around the world anyway. And so all of the technology is very much not understood. We don't have any track record on them. So it's really important that we educate ourselves. Kathy, what do we need to do to educate the public about nuclear as a potential power source, not only for the North Country, but in rural places in general across the country? How can the League play a role in this education?
Yeah, well, in line with our policy positions, we can advocate, first of all, for minimizing the use of nuclear power and expanding renewable energy sources and reducing energy use in general. But if nuclear power is going to remain in the mix as we call it, the league can advocate for sound safety and environmental policies at the state and local level and work to ensure that public input is always part of the process. And finally, leagues in rural areas, we all need to share information with each other and help each other to work together to lobby our representatives at the local and state level to ensure that they respect our communities. Just because there are fewer people living in an area, it cannot follow that their concerns can be ignored. And you mentioned you asked Donna sort of what's on the horizon, why all this energy need? Well, one of the things is data centers. And they're talking about building several data centers in Messina, which is where they're talking about putting this nuclear facility. So, and the league, and one of the data centers, in fact, would use 1,335 megawatts of power, which is as much as a city of 1.5 million people. Now, and this is for AI. This is AI. So the league supports a proposed 3-year moratorium on the building of any new data centers in New York to allow for new state and local regulations to be researched and written to better protect the environment and the interests of neighboring communities. So the league, has positions, is developing more and more detailed positions. So that's what the league can do, is to educate people about what is likely. I mean, there's the nuclear power, and then it's what the nuclear power is likely to be used for and the impact of things like data centers.
Thank
And
you.
also
Go ahead. I was
being
going to
able
say,
to,
Dan, that was to me one of the most powerful parts of the presentation was Hope Hicks at the beginning talking about the native point of view, because we know native lands and native peoples have often been sacrificed, and they don't want this, do they?
absolutely not. Absolutely not. There are actually kind of three different kinds of governments within that res. There's a tribal government that is on the Canadian side, there's a tribal government that's on the American side, and then there's a traditional government. They seldom agree. This time they did. Absolutely. When it comes to protecting the land, and the land means more than just what's under your feet. It means the air you breathe. It means the water that's in front of you. It means all of the creatures that are there, whether they're bugs or birds or dogs or whatever. And that's an important perspective. You were just talking about AI and what can be done about it. I think the things that you've been sharing with us, Kathy, about the upcoming meetings in Messina by the town board, and then also one by the county. Funny that it's at the same time, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. Environmental Management Council, the
Yeah,
county, St. Lawrence County. Yeah, they're going to be
yeah,
meeting too. And
uh, um,
talking about data centers.
yeah, yeah. Got to go to one or the other. Whatever one you go to, I'll go to the opposite one, and then we'll compare notes.
Well, this is, we're not going to solve this issue in one episode of North Country Matters, but this is clearly something that everybody in the North Country needs to be aware of and they need to be thinking about. And there are these upcoming meetings. There are going to be plenty of opportunities to ask the hard questions and demand good answers, because as I think you mentioned during the forum, Dan, people like to reduce this to a silver bullet for a depressed area. Oh, this is going to bring jobs. It's going to bring money. It's going to bring everything. Well, we've seen what some of those silver bullets leave behind us when you look at the environmental cleanup in places like Alcoa and GM. Those businesses are gone from Messina, but the fallout from that environmental damage is still there, isn't it?
In our lifetime, the growth and development of large corporations has changed how we do development. When I remember when I was very young, one of the first things that we would think about when you were trying to do something new was, what might be the unintended consequences? We know this great, wonderful thing is we've designed to happen, but before we let it loose, shouldn't we see if there's some kind of undesirable things that will fall out of it? We're doing that same thing. We've changed how we look at things. We call it risk now. And we come up with all these mathematical models of how to do it. And all it does in the end is make lay audiences turn away because this is professional. He must be talking about something understood. I think to me, what has to be done is we have to go back to what's called a precautionary principle that has these elements. We should prevent actions before they happen, even if we don't know the cause, if we think there might be a problem. Proponents, rather than the public, should be the ones that bear the burden of proof that it is a good thing and it doesn't have undesirable consequences, and a reasonable range of alternatives instead. What can we do instead of this one thing? Why not? What happens if we do nothing? Or in the end, who gets to make that decision? Where's democracy? Everybody who's going to be affected by that decision has a role to play as a stakeholder and not just a rollover for the people in power.
Well, you make a great point, and Kathy, I think that's the role of the league, is to make sure all of the stakeholders have a voice, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah, we are all about democracy, and that means everybody's voice counts.
Well, thank you both for coming in today. As I said, we're not going to solve any of these issues in one show, but there's certainly a lot here for us to investigate and to research and to keep talking about. And I know the two of you are great partners in having those conversations, so thank you both.
Thank you.
Thank you, Donna.
These conversations are a production of North Country Matters. This show is a civic collaboration between the League of Women Voters of St. Lawrence County and the Potsdam Public Library. Until next time, remember, our North Country matters, and you will be hearing more about these issues from us. Thank you so much.
Absolutely.